Hi, I'm Andy Powell. Welcome to the Purpose Project. All topics are fair game. I hope you enjoy. All right, Frank Barbaro, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you coming on. There's a lot of he said, she said around the county, around the politicians, people running for stuff. I've had a few different politicians on, and each one obviously tells me a different story, and I don't know what's going on now. Now you work for Yavapai County Sheriff's Department.
Yes.
How long have you worked there?
Actually, I started part-time in 95 and got on the road in 98.
Part-time? What do you do as a part-time person for the sheriff's office?
Well, there was a guy named Rolly Simmons who he was associated with the G Posse, and I joined the G Posse, and I wanted to do something more, and then Sheriff Buchanan actually came to a G Posse meeting and said, hey, we need help at the jail, looking for people to work there part-time. So I filled out an application, did the background stuff, and started working there as a part-time detention officer.
Detention, okay. That's what you do part-time.
Yeah.
There's no part-time deputies, right?
Well, we have reserve deputies that they have to work like so many hours a week or so many hours a month to maintain their certification. They help us out with training and stuff like that. So there's just a few of those.
Okay. Right on. And you've been there since 95, so we're at almost 2025. So you're pushing close to 30 years.
Yeah, it's a long time.
That is. So tell me a little bit about how you got from the jail into being a deputy and beyond.
Okay, well, first, make sure that I'm not here speaking on behalf of the sheriff's office, and I'm not on duty, and I'll drink some whiskey to prove that. So just so we know, that I'm here as myself on my own time. So, when I started in jail, I was working part-time, and I was actually selling motorcycles.
Nice.
Yeah. So my motorcycle selling career kind of ended when they found out that I wanted to open up my own dealership. So I wasn't really welcome around there. I was working at the jail part-time, and so in 97, I started working at the jail full-time. And then at the same time, I tested for patrol and went to the 4th NARDA Academy. That was where it used to be in Prescott Valley at Yavapai College.
And NARDA is Northern Arizona
Regional Training Academy.
Okay.
So when I got out of the academy, started working in the Mayor Patrol area and worked there for a couple of years and transferred to Prescott. I became a DUI officer. I got on the SWAT team and did that for a few years. And then I went into what became the Special Crimes Unit. And basically we were a uniform street crimes unit, and we would go out and find people driving drunk, or, if there was a problem in the neighborhood, a drug dealer, stuff like that, we would catch them, interview them, book them in jail. If we could, we'd write a search warrant, go back to their house, and really helped clean up some neighborhoods. And then after doing that, I became a detective. Got to investigate everything from homicides to officer-involved shootings and everything in between. And then I went into our undercover narcotics unit, which it's pretty fun. It's probably more fun to try to buy drugs than it is to do them. You just didn't know that. And and I did that for a while, and then promoted to sergeant. Wound up in the Verde working graveyard shifts with brand new deputies, which is a great opportunity. It's a lot of fun because they listen to you. They don't know any better, but they listen to you. And then after that, I got into our canine unit, became the sergeant of that unit, ran a dog for a while, and went back into CI as a sergeant, investigations as a sergeant, because that was something I really enjoyed doing, and there wasn't a lot of opportunities to do that. So when the opening became open, I jumped in there, and then I stayed there until I promoted to lieutenant, and I was the lieutenant of the Northern Area Command. And then I became the lieutenant of criminal investigations. And now I'm the lieutenant in the Southeast Area Command, which is basically from Black Canyon City to Diamond Valley.
Okay. Right on.
It's a great career. It's I would totally recommend it to anybody starting out There's a lot of negativity about law enforcement, but I'll tell you, I mean, this is a great job. It's a great career, and you're really doing good for people.
Yeah, I wanted to do that for most of my childhood growing up. I went into the military and then got out and had a roommate who smoked weed all the time. I'd never smoked weed, but I knew I'm going to be a police officer, so I'm not going to do it. He invited me all the time to do it, and I never did. And through that time being his roommate, I realized this is a law I can't enforce. I wouldn't be a good cop because I wouldn't enforce this law. So, I mean, justice is not always the same as the law.
Well, and being a police officer too, it takes some, you got to temper that power. There's a lot of stuff you can do and a lot of stuff that you should do. And it takes a certain individual to be able to think that way. There's a lot of gray areas in law enforcement, just like in life.
Yeah. So you're currently the lieutenant of the Southeast District, is that what you said?
Yeah, it's called the Southeast Area Command.
Area, okay. Now, where is that in the hierarchy of the sheriff's department?
So basically, we have the sheriff, and then we have a chief deputy, and he basically has the same authority as the sheriff. And then we have a law enforcement commander and a law enforcement captain, and then the area commander is a lieutenant, so you fall underneath them. Okay, so you're like fourth from the top. Yeah.
Roughly.
Fourth from the top or second from the bottom. So you have a deputy, sergeant, then the lieutenant.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a lot more of them than there are lieutenant. How many lieutenants are there?
We have 3 command lieutenants, a CI lieutenant, a task force lieutenant, and an administrative lieutenant.
Okay. So I got a bunch of questions here that I've compiled from citizens, people who work for the county, people who are running for office, people who are online in other states and countries. And I'm just going to go through those questions as we chat back and forth. So first one I have, why has the sheriff's office increased the staffing positions instead of adding more deputy positions? So I want to get the Frank's eye view of what's happening in the sheriff's office.
Yeah, okay. So just to understand, this is the Frank's eye view and not the official position of the sheriff's office.
Yeah, correct.
We're definitely not here talking on their behalf. It's the priorities, and it's kind of interesting that before, when we had there was a guy named Steve Waugh, who was the sheriff after Buck Buchanan retired, and he got us like 14 more patrol positions. And when we had the economic downturn, and that's when he closed the Prescott jail and a bunch of other stuff, and the jail district tax didn't pass. And when we had the economic downturn, we lost all those positions that he had gained. And it was because we had a reduction in force. So instead of laying people off, what we agreed to do with the Board of Supervisors was when somebody would leave our agency, we wouldn't replace that position. Eventually, those positions were taken off the books. Well, I don't know if that extra budget capacity was made available to the sheriff's office, but for some reason we decided to put this money into different types of positions, like civilian positions instead of deputy positions. So we have directors, which are basically civilian versions of like captains who probably get paid somewhere between a lieutenant and a captain pay. We have project managers, we have business managers, we have release coordinators on the jail side. We have 4 public information officers. We have a lobbyist. And we've added all this top-heavy infrastructure without increasing the deputies. Right now we have 83 deputies that work the road. We're considered to be full-staffed. So we have 83 deputies. We have 14 sergeants, so that gives you 97 people. But sergeants generally don't go call to call. They're there to supervise the deputies, to provide assistance to them, and, to do stuff mundane like check paperwork, make sure reports are done. So there's 110,000 people that live in the unincorporated area of Yavapai County.
So 83 is for all shifts, for all hours a day, all days a week, for every area in the entire county, right? So those 83, some of them are at home, right
Yes.
now while others are working.
Yeah,
So it's
7
not
day-
83 all at once.
No, it's 7 days a week, 24-hour day coverage using these 83 guys. Generally, what that means is within an area command, you have 3 people working. 3 people minimum, 5 people maximum. So
How many areas are there?
there's 3 area commands. So what's interesting about that is that there's a standard. It's not really, there's a standard of how many officers you have per 1,000 people, but it's not really what you would provide staffing by. But right now we have about 0.83 deputies per 1,000 people. If you go to Prescott or Prescott Valley, they're into 2s. The Verde agencies are into 2s. The state average for deputies per 1,000 people is 1.9 deputies per 1,000 people. So we are less than half of where we need to be. And that's just a minimum coverage. So the way that computes to people is that if you live in the outlying areas, you have longer response time. The deputies aren't as efficient because they're doing the same amount of work that the agency that has 1.9 deputies per 1,000 people is doing. So they're doing twice as much paperwork, they're doing twice as much follow-up, and they're responding to twice as many calls. So it gives you job burnout. Not to mention, the officer safety risks. We have guys responding by themselves to calls that should have, 2 or 3 people responding to.
So are they falling behind daily when it comes to like doing report writing? Because every call has to have some kind of a report, whether it's a sentence or I don't know, it's a call for service you didn't really do. You made contact and there was no problem, so that's the report.
Well, we have a dispo system to, so basically you could have what's called a dispo 1 where there's no action taken and you could just dispo 1 and close it. But there's still stuff that they have to put in the report. You have to put like, who did you contact? You have to, when you have your body cam running, you have to tag your body cam so they put the right video with the right report number. So there's a tremendous amount of administrative stuff that's left on the deputies. And, it's gotten quite more than when I started.
Okay, and there's no way that the sergeant of those deputies could be doing that administrative work because they're not on the call. They're not having that. They don't have that body cam. It has to be the deputy that does that stuff, right?
Yeah. You have to do your own involvements pretty much, and you have to do your own body cam tagging.
So meanwhile, there's calls holding around the county that somebody should be getting to while they have to do administrative stuff.
Yes.
Most of the time, or is this like generally they have most of it covered fairly well?
Well, calls are always prioritized.
Yep.
So if you have like some type of a violent call, like a family fight or an assault or something, they're going to go to that. But let's say that you have an assault in Black Canyon City, and you may or may not have a deputy there, but then the next deputy happens to be in Cordis or in Mayor. So now this deputy is going to wait 20 minutes before initiating contact.
Is each area command split into smaller sections?
Well, there's smaller sections within each area command, but we don't have enough staffing to like put somebody in each little.
To keep someone within this, 30 square miles.
Yeah, we used to call it sectors.
Okay.
In fact, before we started putting personnel in different areas and task forces and stuff, we used to have a squad up in the Ash Fork. That was the Highline Squad. So there was a whole squad of guys up there. There also used to be a squad in Black Canyon City.
When was this?
This was probably about 6 years ago where they started getting people out of there.
And they did that for what reason?
Well, I think because we deferred a lot of our personnel to our task force.
Which task force is that?
So this is the PANT. It used to be the Prescott Area Narcotics Task Force. Now it's like the Narcotics Task Force and Human Trafficking, whatever comes up.
Okay.
So we have 14 people in this task force. And this is a multi-agency task force. Not every agency in the county participates, and any agency that doesn't have more than one person in it. So
How many of those guys are Yavapai guys?
14.
Okay, so there's more than 14. There's
Yes.
additional personnel that are other agencies.
Yes.
What agencies?
So Prescott Valley, Cottonwood, Camp Verde Marshal's office, Sedona. I don't think they have anybody in there right now.
Any federal?
They do have some federal guys in there. So they have some Homeland Security guys in there.
Okay, and they're part of probably the trafficking stuff or more the drug side of things.
Yeah, I think they're more into human trafficking.
Okay. And can any of those guys do any of those jobs, or are they specifically assigned within that task force and within those fields?
Yeah, they're just in the task force.
Okay, so it's kind of like who's available and who's best at it. Go do it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so guys are being pulled off the road to be put into task forces, but they're not backfilling those deputy positions. Why?
Well, because they can't. They'd have to go to the Board of Supervisors to get more positions. Now, we did get a grant from the state to be able to start what's a new special crimes unit. So we got a grant to get 4 officers. So it'll take about a year to get those guys up to speed, after we get them hired and push them through academy. So, but if that grant dries up, then the county's going to have to either lay them off or decide to absorb those positions.
Okay, now has anybody asked the Board of Supervisors if they're willing to create additional positions? Can you do that at any time, or do you have to wait till like once a year?
Well, this year the direction of the Board of Supervisors was to not ask for any positions for the budget, and that may have something to do with the budgetary cap and all that other stuff.
They put out a notice saying, hey, don't ask for any additional positions.
Yeah, because they did the big raise. Everybody that works for the county got a huge raise. So that, that took up a lot of money, and we can only spend so much money. The state mandates how much money we could spend on our budget. And, when you see in Prescott Valley, and they have this vote home rule, yes, and all this stuff, that's to do a budget override. So we haven't done that in the county. So, they really have to be, they have to be concerned about how much money to spend. Sheriff's office isn't the only county department. If they need to buy a new grader or something like that, it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I do know that the Board of Supervisors would never say no to the county sheriff's office. And, because they're always supportive of law enforcement. And it's interesting that we have all these other positions. We have these directors, these project managers, these public information officers.
Yeah, who gets to decide that those positions are created?
Well, the sheriff would decide that the positions are created, and then he would go to the Board of Supervisors and say, hey, I would like to have this position. So they could do that from salary savings. They could do that from elimination of other positions.
Can the Board of Supervisors tell the sheriff, no, we're not creating that position?
Yes.
Okay, so he says, hey, I want these positions made, and they granted it.
Well, they justified the positions to the board, and then the board, makes a decision based on the recommendation of the sheriff.
Okay.
When you talk to a board member and say, hey, do you know what's going on? Well, yeah, we thought we were doing this to help the guys out. So so
it might be put to them a certain way where the justification isn't exactly in line with what's happening or what's needed.
Yeah.
Okay. So what positions were created? You said there was a lobbyist?
Yeah, we have a lobbyist who basically spent all her time down at the Capitol. She actually lives down in Phoenix, and she helped push they originally had a bill when DPS got their huge pay raise. They tried to push a bill. Sheriff Rhodes and got some sponsors for this bill where the county deputies would have to be paid within 10% of the highest paid law enforcement agency of their county, which would include DPS. So this would be a pretty substantial pay raise for most of the counties. And it started off pretty good, but then they started having some problems, because like counties that didn't want to spend as much money, poorer counties didn't want to have to pay their deputies this much money. Let's say you work at Apache County, that's a pretty poor county. So to pay a deputy close to what a DPS patrol guy is getting, that's a huge hit. I'm not saying that they don't deserve it, because they do, but that's just a hard pill for the county to swallow, and they would have their budgetary problems because all the counties have these budgetary caps just like us. So that's where they came up with the $5,000 hiring bonus and the $10,000 retention bonus. So to trade off for that, and they said, hey, we'll back off this bill if the legislature gives the deputies and detention officers $10,000 and a $5,000 hiring bonus. So that was a pretty good thing, and that's something she worked on, and that was helpful.
Okay.
But what they don't tell you, the fine print in this deal is that Sheriff Rhodes also supported a law where if you let's say you went to academy for Apache County, and you're a good deputy and you want to get hired by DPS. Well, now there's a law that if another agency hires you, they have to reimburse the original agency training costs.
Huh.
So we made a little thing. Hey, here's your $10,000, but now you're locked into a low-paying job, for 4 years.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's something that they don't brag about.
Yeah, that seems like the purpose of that would be to help retention and reduce attrition.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But when you start take away somebody's rights to go work somewhere else and improve their life.
Now, is it contractual? Does it prevent them from quitting?
It doesn't prevent them from quitting.
It just de-incentivizes them.
Prevents them from going to another agency.
They won't be hired at another agency?
Well, it all depends. I don't know of any agency that would want to hire a lateral officer if we had to pay $20,000 to hire this guy.
I see. Okay. That sounds unfortunate for a lot of the deputies or anybody who wants to go somewhere else. All right. So what are some of the other positions that were created or were asked to be created and granted? Well,
those are mainly the ones, and then there's upgrades, where people get incentive pay, where people, one secretary was upgraded from an administrative assistant to a project manager, still does, basically that's a way to give somebody a big raise without saying, hey, we're going to give you a raise, because a lot of these raises, you start giving people 20-some%, that's outside of the county guidelines for, giving people raises. So, the money's there, and it's a question of where the money is allocated.
Mm-hmm.
So, we never had these positions before, and we got along fine. So that's my frustration is I don't have anything against anybody making money. I don't have anything against anybody having a good job or a good opportunity, but our job is to patrol the unincorporated areas, to run the jail, to serve civil papers, and to do search and rescue. And we could do all that without these other people.
Mm-hmm.
And, we need to be efficient in doing that, provide a safe and a good working environment for our deputies, before we start going, hey, I'm going to start adding more office positions.
Yeah, now there's 4 public affairs officers?
Yes.
Okay, what's a public affairs officer?
So basically the main idea between them, so there's 2 of them that go to community meetings. And so whenever there's, let's say Prescott Country Club is going to have a homeowners association meeting. So they'll go to this meeting and represent the sheriff's office. So if people have any concerns about the sheriff's office, these people will report directly to the sheriff. If say, hey, there's speeders here, people are riding ATVs, mostly it's quality of life issues, but they're just there to be a conduit, and then probably, keep in touch through Facebook and social media and stuff like that.
Okay. So this is kind of to increase the level of connectivity between the community, between the citizens and the sheriff's department, and how those two connect, how they play together in the same community.
Yeah, and it's good for business. It keeps if the sheriff finds out some heat's coming down, he can say, hey, go have some guys run some traffic over here. Go do this. So.
What do you mean by heat coming down?
Well, if people are complaining about that,
okay,
then we're not doing our job.
Got it. Yeah. Okay, so 2 of them go to those meetings, and they're kind of like liaisons to the sheriff's office for the citizens.
Yes.
And what do the other 2 do?
One is tasked to our recruitment and selection department, and somehow helps out with hiring. Maybe goes to like hiring fairs and stuff, and just meets people. Makes arrangements for us to go to hiring fairs. Makes contacts like that, and then. We have another one that works for our mental health director. And I heard her on the radio a couple weeks ago talking about some support meetings that they have for people who have relatives in jail. So basically gets a message out there, probably gets a message out there about MAT Force and things like that.
Okay. So how was hiring done before there was this person to do it? Was there a particular job position that hires people, or is it like
Yeah, this person doesn't do the hiring. They're just there to try to facilitate like events.
It's like a recruiter.
Not even, because we have recruiters. So, this person probably just helps get the word out or helps organize or shows up to things. Like one time there was a hiring thing, or you could represent law enforcement at a Diamondbacks game. So we actually had somebody down there at a table. So
they go to job fairs and stuff like that, I assume. Okay.
And I mean, we've been crushing it as far as hiring people, but
so are you hiring more people than you're losing over the past couple of years?
We're maintaining.
Okay.
Sometimes we're a little low. Sometimes, basically we're maintaining. There's still, even though we got this like gigantic pay raise that, that really is.
Is it significant?
It's significant in the regards that we didn't get a pay raise for 5 years before. And
so it brought you up to kind of where you probably should be already?
Yeah. So basically what happened is that the county was losing employees across the board. Sheriff's office, we were down like 28 people, like an area command. And the Board of Supervisors decided to have a salary study. And they had these people come over and, and compare job descriptions between different agencies and what we do and what other people were paying and retention stuff. And this was across the county. If you worked for Public Works, or if you worked for the Sheriff's office, your job was being investigated, and they're figuring out what they needed to pay at a fair rate. And so they did this, and for some people it came out to like 20-some% pay raise. And then you add on that $10,000 recruitment or the retention bonus, that was a pretty good year.
$5,000?
I think it was $5,000 hiring bonus, but a $10,000 retention bonus.
In addition to a $10,000 a year pay raise, or is it percentage?
Percentage pay raise, because everybody makes a little bit different.
Got it.
So let's say, I think the average pay raise is like 22%. In fact, probably 26% in the past 4 years.
That's pretty good.
Really good.
I'm at like 0.3 to 0.5 per year at my job.
Well, the problem is that the county went for a long time without giving any pay raise.
Yeah.
And people were just leaving. They were sick of it across the board. And, so they had no choice but to give this. I mean, and then the sheriff takes credit for this, but this was something that every county employee participated in. And really, who deserves credit for this is Joe Biden, because we had unprecedented inflation that gave us this unprecedented pay raise.
So without the inflation, the pay raise wouldn't have happened.
They wouldn't have given us anything, man. So,
oh my gosh.
It's like, oh my God, this, but here's the problem is that now we have a 25-year plan to max out your pay. So you got to work there. If you were a deputy, it would take you like 25 years to make what a topped-out deputy should make. Most police agencies top out in 9 years. We are already falling behind Prescott and Prescott Valley. So right after we got our big pay raise, they got another 8%. So you look at the lack of staffing. If one guy calls in sick, it screws the whole sheriff's office schedule up. We're moving people call a guy up, hey, dude, you got to work. I know you work in Eastern, you got to work in Sac East today because we don't, we need the coverage. I know you're working day shift. I need you to work swing shift. Wow. And they're changing people's schedules all the time. And that's a direct result of not having enough staffing, because you should be able to absorb a couple sick calls. You should absorb if somebody has training.
So what's your opinion on all these staffing positions that have popped up? Do you think that they're not properly prioritized?
No, not at all. The priority is the safety of their employees. There's no, these guys are going to calls by themselves and they're risking their lives just because they have no other option. When you go to a family fight and you hear somebody screaming for help and your backup's 10 minutes away.
Not waiting.
You should, but you know what? Guys didn't get into this job to wait.
Right.
And they're going to go in and they're going to take the risks.
Yeah.
And that causes a lot of stress. That causes a lot of, disenchantment with the job, because nobody goes over there and says, hey, that was a great job going in there, risking your life. It's just, hey, this is just another day at work. And so I really think that, the priorities need to be making a safe, healthy environment for the guys working.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's not.
Yeah, it's funny. My first thought is like, well, it's gonna be a dangerous job no matter what. But I guess to provide some sort of backup or more support to increase the potential of safety is definitely a priority.
Well, you can't mitigate all the risks, and
Yeah.
bad things are going to happen.
Yeah.
But we owe it to these young men that we lead to mitigate, do everything we possibly can to make their job safer and make sure that they can go home at night.
Yeah.
And when you don't do that, I mean, that's a complete failure as far as I'm concerned. It's a complete failure in priorities.
Well, it seems like it's a domino effect, because if you're building up the staff and not building up the deputies, like you said, you use the phrase top heavy, and that's a good visual for kind of how things are going. But if you're building up the top and not building up the foundation, and those guys aren't getting the support they need, then eventually something's going to give, whether somebody gets injured and can't perform the job, or whether somebody gets killed, which has happened, and then you're down a person, not to mention all of the other effects that go along with that. But people long term aren't going to want to do this job. So then you have less coverage, more crime, and the slow erosion that we're seeing nationwide in our country, the cultural shift. When you take away law and order, when you defund the police, like you think it's a great idea until you're being robbed or carjacked or something, and then all of a sudden you wish there was somebody there to help you. And it just blows my mind, the short-sightedness of these types of decisions and opinions and preferences.
Yeah, it's hilarious is that we're defunding ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, I guarantee you that anything we ask for, the board would give us if it was possible. And it's just the way that we're setting our priorities.
So this isn't a case of board members being, bad decision makers, or us needing to elect different board members because they're bad decision makers.
No, I think they need to be given the opportunity to make the decision.
And they came out and said, hey, don't ask for any additional positions because of the pay raises and because the budget didn't have the ability to pay that.
That was this year. So, this big pay raise has been quite a shock to the county budget, and everything's getting more expensive. Gas is more expensive. When we wreck cars, they're more expensive.
Yeah.
So the budget is taking a hit. And they're actually talking about doing the budget override. So today, I think, was the second Truth in Taxation hearing, where they talked about raising this budget cap, or at least putting it to the voters to raise this budget cap. I think it has to be a voter incentive to do that. So, it's they're trying. It's just we can only spend so much money.
Yeah. Now, does every deputy have a take-home vehicle? Does everybody get to take their vehicle home?
Yes.
Okay, so do you have a fuel card where you go fuel up wherever you need to?
Yeah, we have a fuel card. We usually fuel up at county fuel locations or ADOT fuel locations.
Okay, so I know of one spot where there's the sheriff's office, and then there's other little departments throughout the county.
Yeah, it's like the sheriff says, we have our main office on Gurley Street. We have the jail facility, which is just jail stuff and the other stuff associated with that. And then on Commerce, you have
That's the one I'm thinking
that's
of.
where the fleet management is, developmental services. A lot of those county buildings are there. Then we have a county complex in Cottonwood. And then in Camp Verde, we have another fleet complex, and that's where we have gas pumps there too.
Okay. Right on. Well, as far as recruitment, retention, is there anything else that you know that people should know about all that? From an insider's perspective, like what's happening with all that we, the people, don't see, or that we can influence if we want more deputies around?
So it probably costs $70,000 to get a deputy just ready to hit the road. So we have to send them to an academy for 20 weeks. And of course, they're paid during that. They get their uniform money, a couple $1,000s to get outfitted to work here. After they get out of academy, they're on field training for 17 weeks. And, and then we have, other stuff, we teach them how to shoot a rifle, and qualifications and all that stuff. So you're spending like 40 weeks with these guys not getting anything out of them except paying them, because we're training them. So when they get frustrated and leave the agency because they don't feel safe and because the schedule is always manipulated and they can't work the shifts that they bid, that's costing you $70,000 a guy. So when we say, hey, we're fully hired because we're sending 14 guys to academy, don't be proud of that. We just wasted, $100,000 or $1 million actually. We just here's some more money we're wasting because we're not retaining our people. We still have people leaving after this, greatest raise in the world. Mm-hmm. So it's not money, there's guys that have to go up and work in the High Line and Ash Fork and Seligman by themselves, and I mean, that's a crazy area.
Yeah. It's a little sketchy.
Yeah. And really anytime anybody has to work by themselves or anytime, most of the guys will not tell you that they're leaving because they don't feel safe. And when they start telling you they're leaving because they don't feel safe, that's a problem.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else about recruitment or retention that you want to share? I'm going to move into a different subject if you're going to go on that.
You just got to treat the people right, and that's how you retain them.
Yeah.
This is a 25-year career, so there's no reason for anybody to leave if we're doing our part.
Yeah, no kidding. We live in a beautiful, beautiful place. Well, next is the topic of the internal affairs and the weaponization of the internal affairs against the deputies. I've heard this from multiple sources, people that don't know each other, and I was led to believe that at first that it's happening all over. Then I was corrected by the sheriff saying that there was like a one person or one incident that's disgruntled and that is saying these things. And then I started talking to more people, and it turns out that there's a whole bunch of different instances of the internal affairs kind of being used against or to intimidate the staff or the deputies. Now, what's all this about?
So it's kind of funny that he talks about somebody being disgruntled, because I think if you have a disgruntled employee, then that's a failure on his part, because everybody should be happy to work there and everybody should be saying, hey, this guy's a great guy. Weaponization of internal affairs investigations, I can't imagine that it's not common across a lot of police departments. I looked at our internal, we have a log of internal investigations that we do, and I noticed that a bunch of them were called conduct unbecoming. So conduct unbecoming is a catch-all. So let's say like we had a guy who got a DUI. We called that conduct unbecoming. A guy who
Don't you get fired for your DUI?
No.
If you're an officer, police officer?
They tried to fire him. They were going to fire this guy, but then they made a deal where they would put him in the jail.
So he's no longer enforcing laws that deal with DUIs. He's just working in the jail. That's the trade-off.
So basically, if you get a DUI, you'll get your certification revoked for a year.
Which is your AZ post certification that allows you to be a peace officer.
Yeah. So that'll be suspended for a year. And
no pay?
No. So fortunately, he was able to work in the jail. So where you don't need a driver's license, obviously you need somebody to drive you there. But at least the guy was still able to keep a job and do something. And he, depending on how he does, he may be able to come back out and work on the road again. Of course, he's going to have to own that DUI. If you ever arrest somebody for DUI, I guess he's a DUI expert.
Yeah, there you go.
But as somebody who has done internal investigations, when you just call something conduct unbecoming, it turns into a fishing expedition. So let's say I'm investigating this person for, doing something, and then they technically kind of lie to me about something else. That's not part of the investigation. Well, I got this big umbrella under conduct unbecoming, so I can kind of snoop a little more. Whereas where you make the investigation narrow to a specific incident, then you have to stay within that specific incident.
Okay.
So, and there's been a lot of these IAs. What happens is that they have this big investigation. They send somebody home on admin leave. It turns out that they didn't do enough to get fired, so they get a consolation prize of a written reprimand, which is unappealable discipline.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, man, it's a very nerve-wracking, stressful thing.
Yeah.
Especially if they send you home and you got to sit at home for 8 hours a day.
I have been in that position before. It is very, very stressful.
And then nobody talks to you because they don't want to catch you.
Yeah.
They don't want to catch
guilty
the
by
IA.
association or something. So the purpose of internal affairs ultimately is to protect the department and to protect the citizens from bad cop.
Yeah, let's say like there's a legitimate, let's say some female says, hey, this guy sexually assaulted me. I mean, that's a super serious thing. And
could easily happen in a rural area with a deputy. It makes sense.
So that would be an internal investigation.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody getting upset at training and yelling at somebody shouldn't be an internal investigation, but it was. Especially I find that like super interesting that somebody gets in trouble for yelling at somebody, and our chief deputy has a legendary reputation for, losing his mind and screaming at people.
Does he get an internal affairs conduct unbecoming investigation?
No.
I see. So how many internal affairs people are they? Are they peace officers? Are they regular citizens? What's the structure of an internal affairs office look like?
So basically, it would be assigned to a detective to do the investigation.
So it all depends. A police officer, or a deputy.
Yeah. So let's say I was going to be investigated. I'd probably be investigated by another lieutenant or a captain or somebody above that. And then
is that their sole purpose, or are they a regular detective doing things and then they get assigned to investigate you?
Yeah, it would just be. It's not their sole purpose. We don't have enough. Thank God we don't have enough business. So they're pretty rare.
Okay.
It's just a lot of these things. Like I know somebody who got an internal investigation because she failed to follow supervisors' instructions on how to punch in and punch out. Because you could punch in or punch out by phone, on your computer, or by like a key card thing in the office. So apparently she didn't do what she was supposed to do, and they had this big IA on her and this big investigation, and where she could have just gotten a written reprimand and just been exposed to progressive discipline.
So a written reprimand or a write-up in most companies, that can happen without an internal affairs investigation.
Yeah, I mean, and there's no reason to waste everybody's time, but it's like I said, it's just like this. It's like this extra discipline that that you're subject to, just being part of that investigation.
So who decides to enact these investigations?
So it has to be brought up by the chief or the sheriff.
Okay. And you mentioned before that the chief has ultimately the same authority as the sheriff in the sheriff's absence?
Yes.
Okay. So what would be the purpose of this? Because it seems like a waste of time unless you want to intimidate people or put pressure on people to behave a certain way. Now there's behaving professionally, and then there's you do as I say or else.
Yeah, and I would say that it's definitely an intimidation tool.
Okay. Why is that? Why would that be necessary?
Well, it's not necessary. I mean, we're all grown-up people that work at this place. So,
yeah, adult doesn't necessarily equal mature. So there could be a bunch of shitbags in there being rebellious. And I don't know if that's the case. When I was in the military, my platoon was an exceptionally rebellious platoon, and we would do all kinds of stuff to antagonize our leadership. But
we have processes in place already. We have progressive discipline that's outlined in our policies and procedures manual. And, it's just my personal opinion that something like an internal investigation should be something that's way serious. I mean, it's like you're going to get a lot of time off, you're going to get demoted, or you're going to get fired.
Yeah.
Everything other than that is covered by our progressive discipline. And, you'll wind up you'll wind up at the same destination that you'd be with this internal investigation, but you wouldn't have this whole thing, hanging over your head.
So it's petty and it's being used to intimidate people.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really unfortunate. Do you have any other good examples of this happening? You mentioned the punch in, punch out. What's another reason somebody's being unnecessarily investigated?
I could tell you a great one. So I had this guy who used to work for me who was he was on a Type 3 incident management team. And
what is that?
It's basically it's what the fire does. When they manage these big fires. So they do this for fires, floods, all kinds of crazy stuff. Mm-hmm. So this guy worked for me in the incident management team, and he got an order to deploy to Illinois to assist with distribution of COVID shots. This is during the pandemic. And, he asked me if he can go, and I was like, dude, we are so short-staffed, there's no way I can let you go.
Deploy by who?
By FEMA.
How does FEMA have the authority to deploy him?
Well, we signed an IGA with them that if we could make him available, he can go, because he has specialized training and stuff, and he works these fires and same thing like that.
Inspector General Agreement, is that IGA?
No, just intergovernmental agreement.
Intergovernment, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, great guy, super qualified to do it, no problems. But we just couldn't send him because we had staffing issues. So he calls me up later on that night and says, "Hey man, can I do this like off duty at the house?" So he was a planning officer, so basically he'd write the plans for how they're going to do stuff. I was like, "Yeah man, no problem." So he does this, and I didn't know that he was going to get his pay was going to get billed to the sheriff's office and then reimbursed by FEMA. So they found out about this, and there's this huge freak out. Well, why'd you let this guy do this? And I'm like, well, he didn't deploy. I let him work at home, and he followed the rules that were set for him, where he had to have so many hours between shifts. He only worked so many hours and all this stuff. And he followed all those rules. So I had a memo saying what his rules were. And they just flipped out. And I get called into the chief's office, and he tells me they're going to start an internal investigation on me for insubordination and conduct unbecoming, and the typical stuff. So I thought it was kind of funny, and he got super pissed about that. And
so these are angry toddlers.
Yeah, so I didn't get sent home or anything like that. I was able to keep doing my job, but basically that was a internal investigation where I got the parting gift of a written reprimand, because I did exactly what I was supposed to do with this guy, but it pissed the boss off. So, and if they wanted to write me up, and that was the whole thing, so they're saying that deployed meant him doing any work for this. I thought deployed meant, him going out of town. And I wrote a memo and said, hey, I'm sorry. I misunderstood your direction. Believe me, this won't happen again. And I brought that memo in with me, and then I found out I was going to get the IA, and I really knew they couldn't do anything to me, but, what if I was, what if I got demoted? What if I got fired and I had to fight for my job back through the merit board? That's the type of stuff that goes through your mind.
Yeah.
And it's stressful, and I really don't think it's fair.
During COVID, was Yavapai County employees required to get vaccinated?
No.
Okay. Was anybody in the sheriff's department required to get vaccinated?
No.
Okay. Was there any kind of incentive to give vaccines or any kind of payment to the county or to the sheriff's office to vaccinate people if they wanted to?
The only thing I know about that is that Spectrum was the agency that provided the vaccines.
Okay. And Spectrum is the sheriff's wife's nonprofit.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, internal affairs. Do you have another example of a way that they're being used unjustly?
I think, or
immaturely.
That's I don't really pay attention to that. I'm not in the office. I don't know who's being investigated for what.
Oh, you're out on the road most of the time?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I thought you were sitting in a desk. All right, what else we got? Anything else on IA before we move on?
No, I just, what you covered is pretty good. I think it's an interesting question that people have, and I'm really surprised that gets out, because you're not really supposed to talk about them.
Yeah, well, people talk about what stresses them out, I think. And like I was saying before, the purpose of internal affairs is to protect the sheriff's office from bad employees and to protect citizens from bad cops, more or less. Would you say that's their purpose?
Oh, absolutely. And, some of the stuff that gets investigated, probably wouldn't be investigated in the private sector, but, we're held to a higher standard of conduct.
Thank God, too.
Yeah.
Right on. What else we got? Let's talk a little bit about pretrial diversion and the recidivism of those types of crimes. Now, how much do you know about that?
Not a lot.
Okay. So then I'll ask questions. If you know them, tell me what you know. As I understand it, with the pretrial diversion system, if somebody gets charged with a drug-related offense, they have the opportunity to divert from being convicted or going to trial and going to a treatment facility instead, or a rehab instead. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, now, how is it determined whether or not somebody goes to that?
See, I'm not really sure, because I think some of it has to do with their ability to pay for services. So
they have to pay for their own treatment rather than, so they're like paying their way out of going to court?
Yeah, so, if you can afford to go to treatment or somehow get the treatment sponsored, then you could qualify for it. So I'm not quite sure what resources are there to pay for that.
Okay, so
I don't believe that the county's paying for it.
Paying for the
drug treatment.
Okay. This is kind of a complex topic. I've been trying to wrap my head around it, but there's a lot of moving pieces that I don't fully understand. So bear with me. So let's say somebody does go to treatment instead of going to trial, and they don't get a conviction because they go to treatment instead. The crime still took place, whether there was a victim or not. So are they counting that crime in their statistics for crime reduction?
See, that's the big recidivism diversion myth. It's like if you're on probation and if you pee dirty for your drug test and they decide not to violate you, are you successfully completing probation? If they don't violate you, so you're successfully completing it, but you're certainly not
on
complying
paper
with the terms.
Right.
And that's this whole thing with this diversion thing, is that if we don't arrest you for something, then the crime never happened, but you still committed the crime. If you think about this drug use.
The crime never happened on paper according to the stats, and this is how much we're reducing crime when those numbers are not accurate.
Yeah, because, I got a damn good job and I couldn't afford to do meth. So, so let's say we arrest somebody, for possession of meth. And this guy, none of them have jobs. So where the heck are they getting their money? They're committing other crimes, frauds, burglaries, all these types of scams, and they're getting their money. We're just nailing them with the drugs. And then if they get diverted, obviously if we're able to connect them to burglaries and stuff after the fact, we would do something about that. But, the whole thing, but when you have these people that are addicted to drugs and stuff living in our community, it's raising the tolerable amount of crime that we have.
Yeah. So then if you start to offer support for these people, then they're going to probably keep doing what they're doing. And are they tracking how many of these people complete these programs and don't use drugs again? Like the success rate? Are they tracking that?
Well, you couldn't track that unless they got in trouble. So you could probably track if they're getting in trouble again or not, or if they're actually doing something where it's serious enough for them to be charged.
Do you know if they're tracking those things?
I know that they have some type of tracking for this program, but I'm not sure how it works or what the data is.
Okay.
It just sounds to me like, when we let people get away with certain things, you start raising the tolerable level of crime in our community. When I first started at the jail, if you got caught with a joint in your pockets, it was a felony. If you didn't have your $1,200 to bond out, you were sitting in jail for like 4 months waiting for your trial. I mean, it's now that's like way heavy-handed, but you go from, marijuana being a felony to marijuana not even, being enforced anymore, but what that shows you is that that's the impact of this level of, lawlessness in our county. Let's change it with meth now. So, meth, you get a free pass your first, second time, now you got these tweakers running around.
Yeah.
What else are they doing? Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying that, if you're committing a drug crime, you need to be sitting in jail forever.
Yeah. Well, like Sheriff Rhodes said when I had a podcast conversation with him, he said the less you enforce crime, the more that people believe the crime will be enforced upon, the less likely they are to do it. So if people believe that they're going to get in trouble for doing a crime, they're less likely to do that crime. But if we're soft on it and we give these other options of like, oh, it's okay, you can just go to treatment, then they're much more likely to continue an addiction rather than hitting rock bottom and saying, okay, I can't do this anymore.
Well, that's the whole theory of DUI enforcement. People don't drive drunk because they're afraid of getting caught driving drunk. It's not like somebody just decided, hey, we're not going to drive drunk anymore as a society. What had to happen is that you're like, hey, you're going to go to jail for a day. We're going to screw up your insurance. You're going to be publicly humiliated by going to court. And that's why people stop driving drunk. So the drugs is a little bit different. There's the mental side of addiction. And, it's like you talk about like a mother that'll go to prison and lose her children because she wants to use drugs.
Yeah.
And it's not really the drugs. It's the addiction to the drugs. It's what the drugs are doing to her body. So, but that's got to be tempered. You can't just say, hey, man, this rehab's good for everybody. If a guy's a complete crook and has an extensive criminal history and gets busted with drugs, does this guy deserve a rehab pass? No, he should probably go to jail.
Yeah. Now, with pretrial diversion, I think this will be my last question on this. Do you know if that's still an option if there is a victim to a drug-related offense?
I doubt it.
Okay. So if there's a victim, most likely treatment's not an option. They'll have to go to court.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay. What else we got? The bonuses being paid for these retention and I know I said I was off this topic, but these questions are all out of order. The retention and recruitment bonuses. Sheriff Rhodes told me that these are being paid for by the Arizona State Legislature rather than the taxpayers of Yavapai County. Do you know if that's the case?
So if you live in Yavapai County, you don't pay state taxes?
Right. That's what I was going
I
to
need
say.
to get a refund.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. So it's not Yavapai County's tax money that's paying for it. It's the tax money from the state that we are paying for it. So, so either way, our taxes are paying for law enforcement as usual, which fine with me.
It would have been way more efficient to pay the deputies more money, instead of just going this big round through the state. And the problem is now is that the state's budget is totally screwed up. So a lot of these grants and a lot of this bonus money is going to dry up. They're already sweeping the opioid settlement money, and they're giving that to the Department of Corrections, and the counties were depending on that to do stuff.
All right, so the Justice Center that's on Prescott Lakes Parkway, the new Justice Center. Now, when I spoke with the sheriff in early March this year, he said that it would be fully staffed that week. And then that week, I believe they came out with a statement saying that it's fully staffed. I've heard from other people that it is, in fact, not fully staffed. Do you know?
Well, it really doesn't matter. Because all you got to do to fully staff it is you just move people from the Verde to Prescott, and Prescott's fully staffed. We're still down like 20 detention officers, so one of these two places ain't fully staffed.
Is there an equation of inmates versus detention officers that is like a legal requirement to be staffed? Like you need one detention officer per every whatever? I
forgot what they call it. I don't know if they call it post assignments or something, but generally we have a we have a thing about like how many people have to be working in the jail, because there's certain spots that need to have officers working, like control rooms have to have 1 or 2 guys in them. There has to be 1 or 2 guys that services each dorm. Medical services, medical thing. So, there's a pretty rigid staffing requirement for that. What I find interesting is that those guys are on 12-hour shifts. So when we're going to call something fully staffed, are we going to call this fully staffed when the guys can work 40 hours a week? Or are we still going to call it fully staffed when guys have to work on this, these 12-hour days?
Yeah. Well, technically with the deputies, there's 83, I think you said, and that's fully staffed according to the available positions, but not necessarily fully staffed for the needs of the county.
Absolutely.
So, again, with the jail, do you know if it's fully staffed?
Well,
by whose definition, basically?
I mean, I could say it's fully staffed without knowing anything about the jail, because they could just close the pod in the Verde, move the inmates and the officers over to Prescott, and okay, Prescott's fully staffed.
Okay.
So it's just a word game.
So you haven't been in there.
But I know that we're down like 20 detention officer positions, so we're not fully staffed. So maybe we're fully staffed in Prescott, but we're not fully staffed in the Verde.
Okay. Interesting. All right. All right. So a little bit about AZ Post certification. One of the listener questions is, while the current sheriff does not qualify, do you plan on obtaining AZ Post certification? Do you know what that means?
Yeah, that must be a question for Doug.
Oh.
So basically, the sheriff is an elected official, so they don't need to be certified by Arizona Peace Officers and Standards Board.
Really?
Yeah.
Isn't that every cop has to be, right?
Yeah, but they're an elected.
So we can elect a sheriff who's not a cop?
Yeah, you could elect a justice of peace that isn't a lawyer.
What?
If you're a Superior Court judge or county attorney, you have to be a lawyer. But yeah, you don't have to be a.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So Sheriff Rhodes must be post certified.
Yeah, I'm sure he is.
Yeah. Well, this is probably not an accurate question then. Post certification requirements were initially established in 1968, but it was called something else, and then in 1994, I believe they changed it to AZ Post.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they changed the standards or not, but that's a little AZ Post history. In the past 2 years, we have had 3 deputies die in Yavapai County. One was murdered on duty, arresting a felon by himself, and the other 2 died of heart attacks. I have not heard of those 2. That's true. The 2 who died of heart attacks, their families are eligible for survivor benefits because of on-duty stressors that took place prior to their heart attacks. Is that accurate?
Yes.
So how do they determine that these on-duty stressors led to the heart attack? Because you mentioned before that they weren't required to get COVID vaccine, so that's probably not a factor.
Yeah, so basically there's some type of way with Arizona Retirement Board, that determines if the heart attack has happened within enough, recently to the last shift, and if there's something happened during the last shift, and then they would decide that, that stressor may have caused that heart attack, causing this person to be able to get the benefits.
Contributing factor.
Yeah.
Interesting. Are there specifics about those 2 heart attack incidents that you're able to share that you know about?
No, not really. I was there when they were working on Tommy, so I was on call that weekend and ran out there. He was a sergeant who was the academy sergeant. Had a real great guy. Had a lot of impact on people's lives, and it was just the Widowmaker just hit him, and then with Jesse, he just one morning we got a page and said they were doing CPR on him, and unfortunately he didn't make it.
No, were these healthy guys?
Yeah. If I have a heart attack and die, they're going to be, oh, yeah.
Go figure.
Yeah,
I
these
saw
guys.
that coming.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Oh, man. Now, I want to talk about Arlo, which is, what is exactly his name?
So that's Sergeant Rick Lopez.
Rick Lopez. Now, he was murdered on duty trying to make a felony arrest. Will you share a little bit about that story and what the controversy is surrounding it?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you, it's a sad thing, you know. What happened is that we had a guy who wouldn't obey a court order. He had some inexpensive property that belonged to somebody else and wouldn't give it up. We'd been out there months before, and the guy had a gun on him and said, "Hey, if you guys come to my house, you know, we're going to have a shootout. Let us get some of the stuff." Actually, Arlo wound up with him by himself at that time because there was a family fight that popped off, and the other deputies had to leave him. So Arlo was with this guy back then, you know, and he stayed with him while this lady recovered some of her stuff. So a couple of months later, she still didn't get all of her stuff and filed a suit through Superior Court and got a court order that he had to give the stuff back. So this guy was just a pain to get a hold of, and, you know, wouldn't contact us, wouldn't talk to us. So she said, "Hey, this guy gets a newspaper every day at 8 o'clock in the morning." So we make a plan. Hey, we're going to set up and we're going to go grab this guy. And guy never gets his newspaper. So I had to go to Prescott for a meeting. So I get a text. I'm like, "Hey, we're going to write a search warrant and see if we get the search warrant granted, if this guy resists us, maybe we can call it the SWAT team or a quick response team." And so one of the deputies and his trainee went to the office to write a search warrant. Another deputy had to go to Dewey for a call. And another deputy had to go to Black Canyon City and unlock the office for an exterminator. So I think this guy saw all the deputies leave, except for Arlo. And then he got in his car, went to drive away. And actually, I was leaving my meeting and I was on the phone with him. And he said, you know, we're talking. I'm like, "Yeah, dude, just hang out there, man. And, you know, I'll come out there and we'll knock on his door and see what his problem is." And he goes, "Hey, he's coming out right now. I'm going to go grab him." You know, it was the last I heard of him. You know, and then we started getting 911 calls from the neighbors saying that the deputy was laying in the ditch. And it took like 15 minutes for somebody to get to him. One of our deputies organized a rescue party and did a great job and, you know, pulled him out. And we got him out and tried to get him to the hospital, but, you know, it's just too late.
And he was shot.
Yeah. Yeah, he got shot right above the body armor. You know, and just, it was a terrible thing, you know, and it's something that, you know, I really think that if there was another officer there, that never would have happened.
Yeah.
You know, I think the guy wouldn't have pulled the gun. And if he did, you know, his attention would have been divided enough where one of us would have been able to get him. You know, it's a sad thing, you know, and it's bad luck, bad circumstances, but, you know, you'll never be able to convince me that this wouldn't happen if we had another deputy there.
Yeah. And,
you know, but that's not a thing. It's like somebody going to arrest somebody for felony charges by themselves. It's a common thing at the sheriff's office.
Yeah.
Because you have to do it.
Yeah. And city police departments, I've been on several ride-alongs, and a lot of the time, if there's any kind of felony association or activity, they'll hold for backup. Wait till backup gets there. It's like a policy in the places that I've seen, at least. Now, did they catch the guy?
Yeah, he wound up barricading up inside of his house. And then we got our SWAT team and everything there. And then the sheriff had our SWAT team relieved by DPS's SWAT team, and eventually he came out.
So he was captured?
Yeah.
Has he been convicted?
No, he's still sitting in jail. It's a death penalty case. He'll probably sit in jail for 5 years. You know, it takes there's a lot of procedures and motions and stuff that happen with that.
And now, how do I phrase this? There's some sort of a blame game happening with his death, and who's potentially responsible for that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
What is that? Who's Blaming whom? And what are they saying?
Well, I don't really want to get into it right now because I think it's probably, it's almost been 2 years since the death. And I just think that originally Arlo's wife was told some information that kind of tainted her whole idea of what happened, and it kind of caused me some damage. And I think that it's just it's a real sad situation, and the original information that she got kind of poisoned her mind, possibly forever. And that information came from the top of our organization.
And it was not true information?
Not true at all.
Okay.
And then, of course, when I questioned about it, it was denied. But who's going to lie to me? Somebody who's trying to save face, or a widow?
Yeah.
So, I don't know, man. It was probably the worst day of my life in law enforcement. And I was on scene when the 19 firemen got killed. And, there's been a bunch of tragedies in this career. That's why I'm glad I'm on the tail end of it. But,
Wow.
the one thing is that at a sheriff's office, at any police organization, you got to have confidence that everybody in this organization has your back. And when you don't have that, you don't have an organization.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with leadership.
Yeah.
If you feel like your leadership doesn't have your back, you're floundering.
There's been rumors that there might be a lawsuit or something, and we're kind of coming up to the end of when that could happen. So we'll just see.
What kind of a lawsuit?
Well, if there's a wrongful death lawsuit filed, it'd have to be filed within 2 years.
Wrongful death of the deputy?
Yeah.
Filed against the department, or?
Yeah, against that department.
I see.
The problem is that all this stuff takes away from the tragedy. And the tragedy is that, we let this guy down. And, what should change after that is, since Arlo was killed, we've added a law enforcement commander position. We've added a director position. We've added a business manager position. We've added all these civilian positions, instead of saying, hey, you know what? We're not going to let this happen again, and we're going to put more cops on the road to prevent this. And that just shows you the screwed up priorities that we have in this organization right now.
Yeah. When it comes to trusting that your guys have your back and leadership, I have a funny little story. I was in the Army, and we were training. We were doing our training cycle to go deploy to Iraq at the time. And we had just gotten a new platoon sergeant. This guy had been in TRADOC writing policies for the last, I don't know, however many years, like several years. I think it was like 8 years or 6 years he'd been in there, and not doing any deployments or anything. And we get this guy, and we're a combat platoon or scout platoon for an infantry battalion, and we're doing our training cycle, and we go in these like simulators, these Humvee simulators, where it's like you're sitting in a Humvee shell, and instead of having a windshield, you have TV screens, and you're doing all this. It's like an arcade game, basically. But the platoon sergeant had to call in an artillery strike. He had to call for fire and send up a 10-digit grid, and and my vehicle had sent in our location to him. So he's like, got to collect all the locations of all your guys, and then call in for fire where the enemy is believed to be. And he called for fire on the 10-digit grid that we gave him for our location. Now, first of all, thank God it was training. Secondly, that set a precedent for this guy that he didn't know what he was doing, didn't have our backs. Most of all, wasn't personable with us. There was a very, I'll say a trade-off feel, very like policy kind of person rather than like a leader. He wasn't a leader, and that's the thing. If you have somebody that isn't a leader and you're supposed to be in this professional, high standard, disciplined field, and they can't get their shit together.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be so difficult for a lot of these guys working, either with people or underneath somebody that they don't trust or that they feel pressure from in their livelihood. And they,
and if you're a leader, it'd be like, hey man, I am sorry that I blew you up. Take ownership for it. I've been doing policy for these years. Yeah. You got to help me out, man.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that the leader has this credibility that they can draw on when they make mistakes, because you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And the thing is that, we always talk about our agency, accountability, that's the whole big thing. You got to be accountable. Well, there's a difference between being accountable and just laying down and taking the blame. You got to be accountable. You got to fix problems. You got to move ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, is, we expect to hold ourselves accountable, but then I think that what happens is that our guys don't have the perception of our leadership holding themselves accountable.
Yeah.
And that's what's causing a lot of the issues.
Yeah. Somebody turned me on to the Kim Before the Storm video. Speaking of
my buddy Corey.
Corey, that was one of the guys in that video, or
Corey was the guy who was in the white pickup truck.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, is he filing a lawsuit?
I think he is. I don't know if he's going to have a leg to stand on, so.
Why is that?
So basically, for people who haven't seen that video, which there might be 3 or 4 people who haven't seen it.
Yeah. It's got a lot of views.
I was pretty upset at Christmas that I didn't get at least this from him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But what happened was that he was being accused of being disorderly with some people at this campground. This like paid campground thing, where you pay and you could go across the country and stay at these places. And he, when they called it in, they said, hey, this guy's got PTSD. He's going crazy. He's yelling at us. He's arguing with us. And, so we respond. And I happened to be in the Verde because I ran over there because there was a pursuit coming down from Payson. So I wanted to go see, see if there's anybody, they needed anything from the sheriff's office. So we go over to this place, and here comes Corey. I think it's Corey. Corey Drew. Yeah, so he comes driving out in his truck. And I'm like, oh, there's a truck. So one of our deputies pulls out right in front of him. And he's obviously agitated. He's upset. And the deputy's like, hey, get out of the truck. He goes, no. It's like, hey, give me your license. No. And
yeah, he's got his window cracked a few inches, and he's got his cell phone on video sticking it out the window.
Yeah, so and then
cops love that shit. By the way, if you don't know, cops love that. Don't do it.
It's kind of funny, we got our cameras on, but we worried about a guy videotaping us.
Well, yeah, but most people don't know how to obtain that footage, body cam footage.
So he's he's like, I ain't getting out of the car. I'm not doing this. I didn't do anything. What's your probable cause for stopping me? And you can't, and then one of the deputies quotes this case law from Pennsylvania versus Mims, which says that you can get a driver out of the car for a traffic stop. And he's like, well, this isn't a traffic stop. And so they're having this they're having like appellate court, at this place, in the middle of this call. So then he turns and then he's like, I want a supervisor. And then sure enough, he point to me and he goes, am I under arrest? I'm like, no, dude. And so I come up and talk to him. I was like, hey, dude, just keep your hands where they have. Keep your hands where I can see them, and you'll be fine. So he, and then I told the guys, I'm like, hey, if we pull this guy out of the car, something's going to happen. I don't know if we're going to shoot his dog or if he's going to pull a gun on us or if we're going to wind up shooting him because the truck's in gear and we start pulling him out and the truck starts rolling forward. I mean, I could just see 100 bad things happening with this. And so I take my guys and I'm like, listen, if we're going to arrest this guy, I want to damn sure make sure we got charges. Here's the statute for disorderly conduct. I want you to interview these people involved. And if we have it, we have it. Mm-hmm. If we don't, we don't. So we determined that there wasn't a reason to arrest the guy. So then Corey starts showing us the video on his phone of his interaction with the guy, and then it stops. And one of the deputies told him that he thought that was suspicious because he stopped recording.
Yeah.
And then that just set him off again.
Yeah.
But so here's the deal. Pennsylvania versus Mims. And I hope I don't have a bunch of people calling the sheriff's office. But basically it talks about a traffic stop is basically a detention for the investigation of a crime. There's no prima facie speed limit in Arizona.
What does that mean?
Like where it says if it's 15, you got to go 15. I think maybe in school zones, it's like that's the speed limit.
Yeah.
So if you ever got a speeding ticket, you get 28701A, speed not reasonable and prudent for the conditions. So let's say that I pull you over for going 45 into 25. So I got to say, so I have to explain to the judge why I don't think that was reasonable under those conditions.
Huh. Good to know.
Yeah, I can say, hey, it's residential area. There's a bunch of driveways. People walking on the streets. But let's say you get somebody for doing 75 into 65 on Highway 69 at 2 in the morning. How are you going to say it's not reasonable? You can see forever. There's no other vehicles on the road. So it's probably reasonable to go to that speed. So, long story short, sorry, I kind of got sidetracked here.
No, it's all good. It's all part of it.
But so. Basically, when you get stopped, you can be ordered out of the car by a police officer.
Yeah.
So Pennsylvania versus Mims is the Supreme Court case law that this went to because they pulled this guy out of the car, found he had a gun, and he was a prohibited possessor. So
prohibited possessor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he shouldn't have had a gun. They found it. He got charged for all that and said, hey, they shouldn't have made me get out of the car. So basically, for officer safety reasons, you can pull anybody out of a car during a traffic stop. Traffic stop is an investigatory detention. So we could legally pull him out of the car. Also in Arizona, there's a law that if you are suspected of being involved in a crime, you have to provide identification. So we had this guy, and I almost want to call him up and say, hey, we should talk about this, because we get all these people calling the sheriff's office and they're like, hey, you guys are terrible for doing this. But basically we could have broke that window. We could have dragged him out of the car.
Yeah.
We could have taken him to jail. But you know what? When we first started talking, we talked about the difference between what you could do and what you should do.
Yep.
Here's a dude that's got PTSD. Do I know he has PTSD? No. But you know what? The guy's flipping out. He's very upset. It seems like he's upset about something that wouldn't upset the normal person. But I don't know. You know what? But why are we going to risk his life, risk our life, risk one of my guys having to shoot somebody? We know who he is. We know where to find him. Why? You
knew that going into the call?
No, but we got his license plate. He's at the campground. They have his information.
Yeah.
It's not like we're never going to be able to find this dude if we need to get our hands on him.
Yeah.
So why beat this guy up on YouTube and injure one of our guys? Just because we can.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole thing about law enforcement. It's got to be tempered with being reasonable. Mm-hmm. And, we're here to serve the public. And I think a lot of times we forget about, because we deal with, 90% of our calls deal with, people doing something wrong or people being, bad people, unquote. So you start looking at everybody the same way. Everybody's entitled to have a bad day. What if he wound up sitting in prison for 3 years for assault on a police officer just because the guy was having a bad day and having PTSD?
Yeah. Yeah, that would suck.
Yeah,
Now, I looked at this guy's YouTube channel, and it looks like this is his thing.
It wasn't. That was the first thing, and then he got another guy on YouTube kind of got him into doing this First Amendment auditing thing.
That's, like a secret shopper kind of a thing to see how well the cops perform in this type of a situation.
Yeah, because I think the sheriff's office was his first interaction with the cops. But you can see with some of his other interactions, we're our own worst enemy.
Yeah.
It's like
Well, that's why we have to, I guess peace officers, that's why peace officers have to be held to such a high standard, because you be disciplined, focused, understand, but that's why it's a stressful job, because you have to consider all the potential things that could happen and the implications of those things. And then, well, if this happens, what do I do? Do I do that? Do I do this? Because if I do that, then it'll mean all these things happen. But if I do this, it'll mean those things take place. So
yeah, and
I can see how stressful that type of a situation would be.
Yeah, and Corey was compliant enough to know that he wasn't going to be able to hurt one of us without having to take a couple actions beforehand. So we had some time.
So what is he suing? Is he suing Yavapai County Sheriff's Department?
So I heard he's suing like all the guys on that call except for me.
Huh. So as individuals?
No, he's suing the sheriff's office, but they're so he's suing the county and those guys. So what happened is after it, somebody got pissed off about the way that it was handled and decided to go back out and reinvestigate the crime and go re-interview the people, and then decided to file charges on him.
Was there a crime?
Well, there was the second time they did the interviews. So I guess they met the threshold of disorderly conduct.
Okay, so that's what the charge was.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
So I think all the vehicle charges, like the failure to provide ID and all that stuff, that wound up getting dismissed.
Okay. Yeah. Is that still in queue? Do you know that lawsuit?
I don't really think he's going to have a lot of luck, but
yeah. Huh.
There's a lot of fallacies about suing police agencies.
Yeah, I don't always get the lawsuit people. Like, let's go sue them about it. I don't fully understand that, but let's see what else we got here. That's all I got from my notes, but I got other questions for you. You mentioned that you were there during the fire with the 19. What was that day like? You were called out there for something, or you were performing some kind of traffic control, or what were you doing that day?
Yes, what we do is when we have a big fire or something like that, we set up our incident command team and we manage evacuations. So we were there evacuating people, and then when the fire started blowing into Yarnell, a bunch of us deputies that were working there, and Sheriff Masher, we were going house to house and evacuating the people that couldn't get out, because the fire. What happened was that this thunderstorm blew in and just changed the direction of the. We thought People's Valley was going to burn, but it wound up coming into Yarnell, and it was actually hilarious. So I've been on 2 fires with Sheriff Masher. One time, a dog chased him and he had to run over. This guy wouldn't evacuate and let his dog out after him, and he had to haul ass and jump over a fence to not get bit. And then in Yarnell, he evacuated a guy, gets him over to our incident command post, and the guy's like, "Hey, where's my wheelchair?"
Whoops.
Yeah. So, it was crazy, man. We were out there, propane tanks were blowing up and stuff. And, if you've ever been in the middle of a wildfire, man, you get that, like, you're in that orange glow, and it's just eerie, man. And, so we were getting all the people out, and then we got a 911 call that somehow they've attributed it to the fire guys. And went over to the incident command, and they didn't know where they were. And so then our forest patrol sergeant figured out that they were trying to make it to that ranch where they were using as a helibase. Or not as a helibase, but they were dipping water out of there. And they were trying to make it to that ranch, cutting through a bunch of brush. So when we were trying to get back there to figure out how we could get back to them, but there's just no way. And then DPS Ranger got out there and found where they had deployed their fire shelters, and then said, "Hey, we don't need." And then there was a bunch of ambulances stacked up by the Ranch House restaurant there, and and they said, "Hey, we don't need the ambulances," and send all the people home that were involved in a rescue. So we knew that they wound up dying. So then And the chief, we went out there and processed the scene, and the chief went out there. He's, I'll tell you, man, he's a real good guy, man. And what he did is he got flags for each one of the 19 guys and draped their body bags with flags. And
This is the fire chief?
no, Chief Noonan.
Chief Noonan.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just tried to honor those guys the best that we could.
Yeah.
It's just a catastrophe, man. And it's like, I was talking to my buddy Dave, who lives out here around us, and he said that he had never heard wind blow against his door except when that happened. So the wind just shifted, and he just felt the wind and all the rocks and stuff hit his door. You know how it is during monsoon season.
Yeah. Wow, man.
Yeah,
that's intense.
That was just a tragedy, man.
Yeah. Well, what's the weirdest or the craziest thing that you've ever seen as a cop?
Let's see here. Probably James Ray. Did you ever hear that guy?
No.
So this dude was a motivational speaker. And he had this event over in Sedona, and he was doing a sweat lodge. And
I think I know about this.
Yeah, so I think I was a graveyard sergeant, and we get this medical call over in Sedona. So I'm like, we'll cruise over there, see what's going on. And I get there, man, and it is freaking bedlam. There's people getting oxygen, people getting CPR, intubating people. I mean, freaking oxygen bottles and people laying all over the place. It's like, what the hell? So I call everybody working to come over there and shifted people around and stuff. And
too many hot stones in the sweat lodge?
Yeah, they just overheated these people. And there's a lot of he did a lot of crazy stuff. When we did the investigation, we found out, he was having people break bricks with their hands, and all these people were going to the hospital, and
their chi wasn't working.
Walking across, flaming coals and burning their feet. Imagine that.
You're not believing hard enough.
Yeah, so I mean that was one of the wildest things, and then, he was just so nonchalant about it. I think he never would have been charged if he was, remorseful and feeling bad about everything. But, we were talking to him and he had to leave so he can go have lunch or dinner, I mean, it's just a weird thing, man. And,
yeah. Well, what are your beliefs? What do you believe happens when you die?
Well, you go to heaven, man. It's like your ultimate reward. It's actually a good thing. You have the people that are afraid to die, and you have the people that, hey, I'll take whatever comes. Mm-hmm. And you could tell if somebody's, a person of faith or not, by saying, hey, this ain't bad.
Yeah.
And I'm not the most religious guy, but I believe in, doing good by people, and that's why I dedicated my life to public service.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're going to shift gears now.
How can we shift gears from heaven?
So I understand that you're not really, based on everything we've said, I can tell, but, prior to this, I understood that you're not really in support of Sheriff Rhodes being reelected.
Definitely correct.
Now, everything we've talked about has indicated why. Are there other reasons why, other than the obvious? I mean, you've been working alongside this guy for 30 years. Was he a good cop?
He was an adequate cop. He wasn't like, he didn't rip it up, and, didn't lead the agency in arrests. And, he's always, he was best friends with Scott Masher. Mm-hmm. So Scott kind of always, looked out for him and, helped him get promoted and, and just, gave him good assignments and taught him a lot about the job. A lot of this is where you learn from people who are above you, and where if somebody above you doesn't want to share with you, you're pretty much stuck at your current position.
Yeah.
So you always had the boss looking out for him. I worked for him. He was my sergeant in criminal investigations for a while, and he was an adequate sergeant. Just the reason I don't support him is because, I don't think he's sincere. I don't think that he is the sheriff's office isn't his priority. I think this is a stepping stone for a political career, and which means that if he's elected again, then his successor is going to be appointed. And, he wasn't elected the first time. Nobody ran against him, and Sheriff Masher took him to all the right places and met all the right people, and what has he done? We have a crisis. The guys that work are the ones in crisis. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. It's like, if you live in an incorporated area, how do you know if the sheriff is doing a good job or not?
Response times to a call?
Well, we live in Prescott. Do we really care if there's only 3 people working in Williamson Valley to Paulden and Chino Valley right now
I do.
To Seligman? But as far as the typical voter.
Yeah. Most people don't even think of that.
Yeah,
it's not on their mind. It's not on their table. They don't.
Yeah, it's like, hey, this guy's a good-looking guy. He's got a lot of signs. He's been on Dancing with the Stars.
Has he really?
Yeah.
Sheriff Rhodes?
Yeah. Yeah. The local Dancing with the Stars, not the, not the network.
Not the TV show?
Not the TV show.
Oh, okay.
But I mean,
he's suave. I'll give him that. When I first met him, I was like, oh, this guy might be cool. Maybe everybody was wrong.
He's a likable guy. But,
until you peel back a layer.
And you look what's going on in his agency, and that's the difference. And that is the problem, is that the people that have the most impact on the election have no interaction at all with the sheriff's office in a professional manner.
Yeah.
Unless you go to jail a lot, and then we probably don't need your vote.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So,
yeah.
He checks all the boxes, for being a figurehead. Mm-hmm. But, he has a duty to the employees of this organization, and he's not meeting that duty.
Yeah.
And that's why nobody should support him, whether you live in Prescott, Cottonwood, Prescott Valley, any incorporated area.
Yeah.
Because, you got to vote for something more than the sign.
Yeah. Yeah, he'd have to do a lot to change my perspective now after interacting with him and asking some basic questions and being kind of bullied. Wasn't directly bullied, but the energy in the room shifted. It got very dark. It was like how dare you ask me that kind of a thing? Dude, it's basic questions. So just like I asked you about the Chem before the storm video, like, own your shit.
All this stuff is what it is.
Unless you're doing some dirty shit, which, everything going on with the Spectrum and the Polara Health and the Complete Care and the pretrial diversion and all that garbage is like, if it's not true, then say so.
Well, it's questionable. At the very least.
It's a conflict of interest based purely on proximity.
If I can't sell the county police equipment and save the county, 40% on each item, save the county hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I could sell the county ammunition and save hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, but I can't because there are procurement policies about that.
So if you didn't work for them, maybe you'd get that contract.
Probably not now.
Well, not now, no. But if you were just a guy, you could get that contract, no problem.
Absolutely.
And then you could jack up the rates probably too. If you want, you could sell it for whatever you chose to above cost, right?
Yeah.
And you could choose to give a discount or not. Yeah.
But there's reasons for that, and even though it costs the county more money to buy from somebody other than me, there's reasons for that. And it's, corruption. It's, it just puts you in a bad position. It's like being a police officer. There's certain stuff that I can't do being a police officer, and the reason is maybe it's not illegal, but it's something that puts me in a compromised position. Mm-hmm. And that's why we don't do it. And that's what I personally don't like about the Spectrum business. Spectrum's a good product. It fills a gap in something that we need. But I don't agree with, the sheriff's wife being the provider.
Yeah.
And you talk about owning it. Well, she works for a nonprofit. That doesn't mean non-paid.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds
Doesn't
like,
mean non-well paid.
it sounds like a charitable.
Yeah.
When you say it
sounds
out
like
loud.
she's volunteering. You know?
Yeah, it's a nonprofit. Oh, what a good person. Well, you're making more than $250,000 a year, and not that you don't deserve the money, but when you're that close to the leadership of the county, like, it seems like a problem to me.
Yeah, if she wasn't a CEO, would Taros be her provider? In fact, when this whole mental health response thing started, Taros was our provider, and we were instructed to use Spectrum. So we kind of ran Taros out, I don't know, but we ran Taros out of business.
You're a popular guy.
Yeah.
Or there's an emergency. I hope not. What else was I going to say? Well, regarding the sheriff running for reelection, what do people need to know about him that they don't already know?
They just need to know that, things aren't great. Things aren't great for the employees. And, that's, like I said, when you don't live, if you live in the unincorporated areas, they know about the long response times. They know about the lack of proactive patrol.
Yeah.
They know about these issues. But like I said, they're not where most of the voters are.
Yeah.
Most of the voters are in the municipalities.
And so if I want to commit a crime, I should go out to a rural area in Yavapai County because the response time, I'm going to have a lot of time to get away.
Well, maybe. You never know. You can, we get lucky too.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, right on.
but the thing is that, they just got to think about this. If you talk about backing the blue, everybody wants to back the police, but everybody wants to back the law enforcement. Well, here's how you back them, man. You get a guy in there who's going to take care of the troops.
Yeah.
Get a guy in there who's going to prioritize staffing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying any of this stuff is bad. I'm saying that the priorities are backwards.
Yeah. Well, in this case, it would be back the brown. Are we
Back
allowed
to Brown, there you go.
Are we allowed to say that? Can we
Yeah.
say that? Just kidding. We can say anything we want. Got the First Amendment. Well, I don't think I have any other questions as far as all this stuff goes. I mean, unless there's any gnarly rumors or bombs you want to drop.
Next time you talk to the boss, you should ask him why the FBI visited him at work.
The boss being Sheriff Rhodes.
Yeah. It's like everybody.
Oh, right. Okay.
Everybody asks him, "Hey, are you under indictment?" So nobody's gonna know if they're under indictment.
Yeah.
But did the FBI visit him because they want to become part of a task force, or
Yeah.
did they visit him because they're investigating something?
Yeah, I got an anonymous tip that he's under indictment the day I was going to interview him. So I asked him about it, and he laughed at me like I was a crazy person. He said, under indictment for what? And I said, something to do with embezzling money. And I mean, maybe, but is he under investigation that you know of?
Well, I know that the FBI came and interviewed him at his office.
Okay.
So that could be for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
But, he should be able to say, hey, they came over to visit with me. He went to the FBI Academy. Maybe they were visiting.
That's true. Could be. Follow up.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, is there anything else you want to share with the people of this county or the people of the world or any of the people that work for the sheriff's office?
Well, just make an informed choice when you vote.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to give a really big thank you to any of the deputies or anybody working for the sheriff's office or any law enforcement department. Thank you guys so much for what you do. You don't get enough gratitude from us. I know it. You know it, but we do appreciate it. So keep your head up and keep doing right by the people.
Well, everybody appreciates that.
Well, thank you so much, Frank.
Thank you.